Hi, this is Emma Drasser, and this is my problem solution speech on the wet market. Just to recap, a wet market is a live animal market where consumers go to purchase fresh or raw meats and produce, but typically meats. The first problem I'd like to address is animal abuse within wet markets in the wet market industry, but the first thing I want to do is introduce you to my dog. So this is Olive. We got her this January. And I wanted to show you just a little bit about her personality so you can kind of get a feel for the type of dog she is. So here we go. So that is Olive pretty much in a nutshell. She's super hyper, super active, loves running around, chasing squirrels. She's also a super love bug. Like, she's the sweetest dog I've ever met. But she hasn't always been this way. So this was where Olive used to call home. This is a dog meat market in Cambodia. This is actually the crate that she was rescued from, so she is inside of here. The organization that rescued her is called Four Paws USA, and this was actually the biggest dog meat market distributor in Cambodia. So what they did was they were able to kind of infiltrate this meat market, and in this circumstance, the man wasn't really keen on having a dog meat market. He didn't have any other way to support his family at the time. So what I think was really cool of the organization is what they did was they actually gave him a rice plantation, and they shut down his meat market. So they gave him a rice plantation as an alternative way that he could make money to, keep his family alive. But this is where Olive was rescued from, inside this cage right here, from Cambodia once again. So like I said, the organization that rescued her was Four Paws USA. So this is actually Olive right here. They were rescued in December of 2019. So she was kept in this crate her entire life. That's all she knew. And she's actually in this cage right here. And these are the individuals who rescued her from the Cambodian meat market. These were the main ones who kind of rehabilitated these dogs that were so tortured. So here's Olive now. She's got her little Easter bandana on. She sleeps in a little fluffy bed. She has a little bunny toy. So that's kind of like her journey. She came from Cambodia. She didn't have any luxuries that a dog normally would. When we first got her, she had no idea how to be a dog. She didn't know how to go for a walk. It was just like she was basically completely foreign to the identity of being a dog. And this is Olive right here when they first rescued her. And these are all the other dogs that were in that cage with her at that time. And they have all been adopted as well. So Olive's case is kind of unique. Unfortunately, for many other animals, the path is not as bright. So Olive was in a dog meat market, which means she was part of the wet market industry. She was going to be sold to a meat market or somebody who is going to consume her or use her meat to eat. So that was kind of her fate that was luckily changed by the people who rescued her, but for tons and tons and tons of other animals, they don't get this sort of happy ending. So what happens is many of the animals are taken illegally. Specifically with dogs, a lot of them were taken off the streets in darkness. They would just steal people's pets, and then it was happening so frequently that people were kind of hopeless about ever getting their pet returned that they would just stop looking for them. And the reason that a lot of these meats are obtained illegally is because they can get really, really cheap meat. So they don't have to go through any trouble if they just steal a dog off the side of the road whereas if they were to go through the process of legally obtaining animals to get meat from, it would be a lot more expensive. So this way they can make a higher profit. The way they transport these animals is really, really disturbing. As you can see here, I added a picture of some, I believe they're parakeets, and it's just so terrible, the conditions these animals are put into. These are cats, because there's also a cat meat trade. So many of them are just jammed into these crates, and a lot of them don't even survive. As you can tell, there's like very little room to breathe. They're like crammed into these cages. Lots of them have broken bones. And then they're like thrown onto trucks to be transported to markets where they're sold and distributed and marketed, and it's just terrible. So a lot of these animals do die in the process, and then people who transport them don't really care too much if they die in the process, because they can still be sold and they can still make money off of it. They just don't make as much money as if they were alive. So once they're at the slaughterhouse, they are tortured beyond belief. So there is a belief in Asian culture specifically that the more an animal is tortured before you consume it, the more adrenaline it releases, and it makes the meat taste better. So sticking with the example of dogs, once they are removed from their crate and transport, the distributor will usually want to plumpen them up and make them fatter so that they can sell them for a higher price. So this usually means they will put a tube down their throat and force feed them things like rice that will get them nice and big so that they can sell them and make a higher profit. There's also a belief that specifically in men, tougher animal you eat, the more tough you will get. So they think that if they eat something that's dangerous, like a crocodile, they're gonna retain some of that strength, and it's gonna make them, a stronger person. This really isn't only dangerous for animals. Obviously, the animals are tortured beyond belief. They're boiled alive, they're butchered, they're slaughtered, they're crammed into tiny cages, their bones are broken, they're just committed to a life of just pure torture in unbelievable standards. But this isn't just only dangerous for animals. This also affects the consumers, who then could pass it on to other people as well. So even if you don't care at all about animals, you still should be concerned about wet markets. And here's why. Wet markets are a major factor in spreading diseases. The diseases that it creates are called zoonotic diseases, which means they can transfer from animal to animal species, and then once the human consumes it, then it can travel from human to human. And that's how the disease gets so widespread in such a short amount of time. This mainly happens because of the way these animals are stored. So as you can see, a lot of times they have stacked cages, and before the picture with the cats, they were stacked as well, as long as the birds were stacked. So what happens a lot of times here is an animal will get sick, obviously because they're being tortured and not fed correctly, and the individual animal will be sick. So let's first say, for instance, this bunny up here is sick. Then when it goes to the bathroom, that will drip down into the stall underneath it and spread to all of these animals underneath, and then thus would spread downward and hit all of these animals on the bottom here. So it travels very, 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 very quickly. One thing you can thank wet markets for is the spread of the coronavirus. So the coronavirus was actually started or bred in a wet market. Another kind of virus that started there was the severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS. Ebola also started in a wet market. And of course, COVID-19, or as we call it, the coronavirus. So here's some information about COVID-19, just so we can get the full extent to what these diseases brewing in wet markets can grow to a full extent of. So these are the confirmed COVID-19 deaths on April 18th, 2020. As you can see, we are in a very, very dark zone here, and these markets were in Asian countries, so over here, and yet we are still in the dark zone. So this just shows how easily it can transfer from human to human no matter what. It started with animals, but since there's zoonotic diseases and the animals were consumed, it was able to easily spread from person to person. So we all know, obviously, this is why we're not in school right now. COVID-19 is a global pandemic. It's a silent killer. It can show no symptoms at all and still be passed on to a bunch of different people. Tons of people everywhere are dying because of COVID-19. It's led to a worldwide quarantine, tons of job loss, and it has devastatingly hurt our economy, no matter what the president says. So, my solution, if we want to end all of these spreads of these terrible and horrendous diseases and stop the mistreatment of animals, we need to close the wet markets once and for all. This is the only solution that is going to solve everything. If we just make more regulations, it's not going to be enough. This is why I say we should support IFAW. I support this organization because they have already proven just how much they are motivated to make changes for animals specifically. Some global changes they've already made are banning the commercial hunting of seals, banning the ivory trade, so when people used to take the tusks off elephants and trade the ivory, they created the largest Southern Ocean Marine Sanctuary, and they also organized the largest oiled bird rehabilitation program. And all of these animals were rescued, released back into the wild, and went on to live their expected lives. So, what is IFAW doing in terms of disease when it comes to wet markets? So they obviously are not stupid. They know what wet markets can do. They know how quickly these diseases can breed and spread within wet markets, not only to the animals, but to humans as well. So they have established law enforcement officers that kind of go around and make sure there aren't wet markets going on illegally, because wet markets avoid the law a lot of times. Like I said, they often get their meats illegally, so it's kind of like an underground type of business. So these law enforcement officers will just be around to make sure that everything is following legal regulation. So they also displayed billboards not eating foods from wet markets or not eating from live animal markets, and that was displayed at an airport where tons and tons of people frequently pass, so it made a big impact on their society. They partnered with the largest food delivery app, which is Meituan, and what they did was the app itself cut all of their ties with any distributors that used wildlife meats or exotic meats or any meat that came from a wet market or illegally, and so they're supporting directly the shutdown of these wet markets by making it more easily accessible to get food that is not illegal or exotic meats. So how can we help? Well, I think the easiest thing we can do is obviously support the IFAW, because they have the power, they have the motivation, they have the people that can actually make a difference. I can't sit here and say that I myself can stop wet markets because it's such a global issue. I cannot do that on my own, therefore I will raise awareness for this organization that can. Obviously, something that we can all do to help is stay informed about, the world and the live animal markets and, what they can do. So staying informed about these kind of things can often lead to, you being more aware of what's going on around you, and just being more knowledgeable about what things you do and don't want to support. I also think if we support the IFAW, this can stop another pandemic before it happens. It's only a matter of time before another disease is brewed within the wet markets, since they're not going to improve their, regulations anytime soon. And even if they did, it wouldn't be able to stop it because there's so many animals packed into this small space. There's just no way disease is not going to spread. It's just so unhealthy and so unsafe for the animals and for the consumers. It's just not a healthy business to be supporting. So these are my references. And that is it. I hope through my presentation I was able to inform you about the problems that go along with wet markets, as well as convince you that there is a solution to this problem, and that solution is to close all wet markets in order for the safety of not only the animals, but for humans as well. Thank you.